Hi everyone, Gabrielle here. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made a hand-carved stamp of this little wren to add to my Gelli printing. And I've put a link to the little wren outline in the description if you wanted to download that and print it out. It's a very simple shape. I just had a look at a few different photographs and kind of made my own up that's very simplified. And you can see here that I'm using a block of easy carve material. It's kind of like an eraser. It really is exactly like an eraser, but in a block that's kind of easy. You don't have to find an eraser, but you can also use real erasers if you can find them. So you can see I've just transferred the outline with pencil. Now I'm using lino cutting tools. So the one with the small V I'm using here, facing away from my hands, carving out the outside of the outline. So I'm just using that V to dig into the eraser. This material is really, really easy to carve. So compared with lino, where you really have to put in a lot of elbow grease, this one, this stuff is like butter to cut through. It's so easy. You feel like you're cheating. And yeah, so if you try it, you'll be pleasantly surprised, I think. One of the reasons I really wanted to do this as a stamp, this little wren, rather than in foam or in paper, as I've done some others, is I really wanted these little tiny skinny legs to be just these little dark legs, and I couldn't think of another way to do that, and I thought a stamp was going to be a good way to do that. So you can see here I'm just coming in. When you're carving your stamp, you need to think that any material that's left uncarved is going to be the bit that prints, so that will be the bit that's dark, and the bits that you're cutting away will be the white, will be where the paper is left. So I wanted to have a dark outline around my little wren, and then I wanted to come in and carve out the little segments. So here I'm using a bit of a wider tool to come in and carve out his feathers for his around his wing. So when you carve out the spaces that you want to be white, one of the really nice things about lino printing or this kind of carving is that you end up with little texture marks. So the direction that you carve in is actually, you can use it to your advantage to create little marks like feathers to give the impression of wings and details. So if you actually think about the way you want to carve and the direction of the marks, it can add a nice bit of texture and life to your work. It's one of those things that just takes a bit of trial and error. What I was doing here is I decided that I could have just carved around all the white around my bird and had a square stamp. But I was a little bit worried that if I did that, probably some of the marks might print around the edge and that might kind of spoil the image a bit. But I also wanted to be able to place him, this little delicate bird, on some leaves and to be able to kind of move it around and see where the outlines were. And I thought if I had a big kind of opaque stamp, it would be a bit hard to see where it was. So I had this idea of cutting out the stamp, and I found like could not find a proper knife. We just had this really tiny little Stanley knife, so I was sort of hacking away at it, really not very professionally here, but anyway, it did the job, trying to cut those little delicate legs without actually chopping them off, and really just bending the eraser material till it came off. So there may be probably a lot better ways to do this, but that's how I chose to do it, and it works fine. It's very forgiving, luckily, this material. It's very good. And so just snapping off that final bit, I think with a sharper knife or a knife that's a bit stronger would have been better. So here he is, finally. And I was just going in and just getting my carving tool and going back and fixing up little bits that I'd missed there. Now this is a way that you can test whether your stamp is actually going to work and what the outline is. So just using a stamp pad, I've just inked him up there, not very well the first couple. So I thought I'd better put a bit more ink and try that again. But you can already see some of those little markings when I was saying the carving, that you can see some of the markings in the wing and in the tail. It's kind of a nice thing. So it's a good way to test, and then you can go back in, carve a bit more out if you want to. Now here what I'm doing is just like in previous videos, I'm inking up my Gelli plate. I'm using a mixture of Prussian blue and Payne's grey Matisse structure acrylic paints. So just a heavy-bodied acrylic that holds the paint quite well, holds the impression quite well. and I found some gum leaves that had fallen down. We had a big storm here, leaves everywhere, so I picked these up from just around my street, and I'm just here going to put some paper over to get all the paint around from those leaves and really press in, get that detail impressed into the plate. So I was thinking these leaves would form a nice little stand for my wren, so that he would be able to perch on these leaves and look kind of realistic. Not sure about the kind of proportions, but anyway, it's all artistic license, isn't it? So you can see there that those leaves have left a nice impression, and you can see the gum nuts and the eucalypt leaves. You know, obviously, if you live in a different place, you might use whatever local leaves you have, and you might do your own different sort of bird. This was just an idea that I had. So there I was just working out how to place him, where he might fit. Luckily, he just fitted in that little opening there. What I'm doing here, I've actually got another jelly plate, a smaller one, and I'm going to use that as a stamp pad. If you don't have another jelly plate, that's fine. You could also just roll out some ink on maybe like a plastic lid or something that's not porous, ink it up, and then use your brayer to ink over the stamp. That would work equally well. And I'm just pressing him in here, hoping for the best. And look, he printed really well. I was very excited. This was the first time I'd done this, so I just thought I'd film as I went, and I was glad that it all kind of worked the first time. I'm just going back in and touching up some of the stamp. Even though it worked well, there's just little areas that I thought could be a little bit darker, so I'm just going in and touching it up a bit with some of the paint that was left over on the jelly plate, and also just scraping away maybe some of the paint with the gum leaves that had perhaps the outline wasn't quite as clear as I wanted. So you can always use a dry kind of paintbrush for that. Now I'm just going to be doing the final layer. So obviously you wait till the bird and the leaves are really dry. Those structure paints dry quickly, but if you're using like an open paint, wait till it's really dry. Going in with my brayer, I've mixed a couple of little colours in just to get a bit more interest. I did kind of put a whole glob of green on, which probably, in hindsight wasn't ideal, but I quite like the sort of happy accidents of having those little bits of colour. So coming in and really thin, that layer needs to be quite thin for your top layer, I've found, in order for the bottom layer to really come off. I did actually leave this for a while, so even though it looks like it's instantly coming off, I did leave it for a few minutes before I pulled it off, and I find that actually ensures that it comes off cleanly. So you can see it all came off. There was nothing left on the plate, which is really good. Then I was going back and just actually painting in the colours that I wanted. You could just have it. You don't have to go back and paint, but I think the fairy wren, that bright kind of turquoise blue of the fairy wren that's so startling when you see them in the bush, is what I really wanted to capture here. So you could also paint. You don't have to do it afterwards. You could go in and sponge the paint on the plate and print it all at once. I've also tried that, and that works well with a makeup sponge, particularly one with like a little point to it can be really good. And going in with a bit of coppery colour, and I think it was mixed with a bit of an ochre colour, just again in acrylics, a little bit of water, just painting in the wing. You don't want to be too heavy-handed or do anything that's too opaque over the top of your printing, because you'll kind of end up washing over those lines and you won't see them so clearly. And then I was just mixing up a kind of greyish colour for his feathers. So with a bit of ochre, a little bit of the Payne's grey, and yeah, just keeping that quite light. Then I decided I was being a bit of a perfectionist. I just wanted to get rid of some of those little white spots in the printing, just to make the bird a bit darker. So just going in, it's all really, at this point, it's your artistic vision and how you like it. So that was what I was aiming for here. And I just like the contrast of the bird against the kind of natural leaves and the ghost print there. You could do a lot of different variations of this. I was thinking like butterflies on foliage or little beetles. There'd be lots of things that you could do that would be really fun. So that's him. If you see it close, you can see the kind of detail, which is really lovely. And this is the stamp, just in case you wanted to have a good look at it and pause it. And this was another version with the leaves with a bit more green. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. See you again. Bye.